services to people with disabilities, because while we're not for profit, while we don't have any shareholders that we give our profits to, we reinvest them, and that's what that's about. And I think we should be as business-like as possible in our delivery of services to people with disabilities and to other marginalised groups. The HSE that you see there, that's our health service executive, it's our, which funds health services really in Ireland. And we talked there about the service level agreements, and we talked about this previous grant and aid with little focus. There's still some of that left, particularly outside the disability sector. And for government now, when money is tight, you see them focusing on funding organisations that have proven and measurable outcomes, and we should be well able to stand up to that. And you know, in the past, disability organisations were very often the first to be hit in a cut, especially if you're in the health services, because the acute hospital services, everyone wants the accident emergencies funded, and the ICUs and all of those, and beds and everything. And sometimes money can get bled out of the disability sector into the acute hospital care. And now that there's a strategy and structure there, you know, we're keeping our beady eyes that doesn't happen. So if I could move then to the next slide, the impact of the economic downturn. Paul, I hope I'm okay time-wise, am I? Hey, we have had a downturn like no other. There has been a seismic change. I often look at this recession and I say, hold on folks, we really only had a Celtic tiger for about 7 to 10 years, you know, and all of a sudden we're saying we've never seen anything like this. Of course we have, of course you have too. But the problem is we have had quite a good ride for the last number of years, particularly in Ireland with our Celtic tiger, and I suppose built on not so great foundations, to pardon the pun. But so what? It's here. We have to live with it. We have to work with it. So far it's lasted about 3 years. We're kind of we're hoping we're seeing the worst of it. There's a few wobbles happen. There might be another year or two of it, but we're hoping, we're ever so pessimistic in Ireland, by the way, and we're hoping we'll get out of it sooner than everyone else predicts. And God help us, maybe we should be saying a bit of that as well. But the development of the national strategy obviously has been delayed. The whole rollout, the 6-year rollout, hasn't happened in the same speed as we expected it to. But the most important thing we do is while we have to tweak the timetables, we don't forget the timetables. And we keep the government departments ensuring that they have disability on the top of their agenda when allocating their less budgets than they had a few years ago. But you have to stay in play. And I think that's the most important value that the National Disability Strategy has, and that whole monitoring. And I also think it's really important to acknowledge the great efforts that people have made in this strategy that were not ever involved in disability, or never thought of disability. The public servants that are not in the Department of Health or Education or the normal, I suppose, more popular disability departments, but the others as well. And it's also important, I believe, to thank people for their efforts and acknowledge that, okay, while you'd wish that they went a little faster, sometimes that you'd also acknowledge what they have done. And if you don't do that, you know, you're missing out on a great motivating tool, I believe. So I would say here they've done a huge amount. We've come a long way in the strategy, a long way to go, but we're still on the road and we're still driving that car, which is the most important thing. I think the disability sector has always been really good at doing more for less and finding creative ways and alternative ways and encouraging and bringing in their community to help them achieve their mission. And I think no matter where we are, what country we're in that is hit by recession or in cutbacks, I think the value that the not-for-profit sector brings to the country in a time like this is very significant, because the state can't, nor the private sector, can't mobilise the community around delivery and making sure we do the very best for people with disabilities as the not-for-profit can. So I think David Cameron over in the UK has called it his big society response, and I know he's in a little difficulty in relation to it at the moment, but needlessly he has it right. Because if we mobilise our communities, we can add so much. The sum of the parts, you know, is what it's all about. And it's our families and people behind our clients and our students. It's the local shopkeepers. It's whoever it is that comes on board and works for your golf society, your golf day out yesterday. They're the people that you can add to your list of valuable assets in the not-for-profit. And I think we should all remember that. And I suppose in a time, can we go on to the next slide, please? In a focus on outcomes, I think we should all work together, and the organisations here in the United States and ourselves under the banner of Workability International, where Frank, as immediate past president, have done an awful lot in ensuring that they're to the edge of best practice in services to people with disabilities. And that sort of international interaction is really good. So you can see what's there in relation to the disability sector. Smooth seas make a poor sailor. We're used to providing services within scant resources when we have to. This focus on the needs of individuals in relation to funding is really, really good, because I think the most important customer we have is the person we're providing the services to, but sometimes that gets clouded a little bit by the person providing the funding. And I think that the sooner we all move to this individualised funding, the better, and we're really, really dealing with a real customer. I believe that in relation to disability services right across what I've seen internationally, are striving to ensure that they have quality and quality marks, whether they be national ones or international ones. We have the ability to access the philanthropic funds, and as I said earlier, in relation to the fundraising income, that brings huge value. That's who we are. And sometimes fewer resources can promote independence for clients with a greater use by us of external and community-based resources. And moving on then to our last slide, I suppose, I think it's really heartening that I suppose right across the world, mainly led by disability sector and organisations for yourself, that development in disability policy is continuing. I talked about our mental capacity bill. We've got to get that sorted. But the most important thing we've done recently is the implementation of mandatory standards in relation to residential services. We have an ageing population within the Rehab Group, and that is challenging us to have far more age-appropriate services. Whether it was probably age-appropriate for younger people, and perhaps we must grow with the needs of our service users, particularly in our health and social care division. We have a significant emphasis on stakeholder participation. Right across the companies of the Rehab Group, we have stakeholder bodies. In our rehab care services, which the Health and Social Care is called NRAC, the National Rehab Care Advocacy Council. In our training services, it's called the National Representative Council. And we fund those. It costs us a few $100,000 a year to do that, but the money is given to the people themselves. They elect up from their centres, the clients, the elections start at centre, and they work themselves up like any good democratic process to the national councils. And they're just made up of clients. And they come in, they're on the board of our companies that are appropriate to them, like Rehab Care has its Rehab Care board, has its NRAC representatives, NLN has its NRC representatives, and they bring very well, not inappropriately, very appropriately bring significant issues to the boards of those companies. And they also meet with the management at national level on issues if things aren't moving well or if they have some ideas. But the very, very, very most powerful activity of these representative bodies is they have their representatives at the local level. And they not only meet or sit down, should I say, with the management and staff of the centres, they also go out and they're campaigning for pedestrian crossings or better access to services, dips in sidewalks and that. So they're very, very active, and they're very challenging, and that's what they should be. And we put a lot of effort into encouraging those organisations, and that they're, as I say, they're democratically elected every time, they're an AGM and everything, and it's really interesting to go and see how very potent they are as politicians in relation to getting their vote to be on these things. I suppose our other objective is to ensure that we play a central role as a partner in the delivery of services and the development of policy. And while I concentrated on Ireland today because we're headquartered in Ireland. We do this. We have a lot more to do because the UK is much bigger than Ireland. But in Poland as well, we're out there now trying to influence the policies out there as well. So wherever we go, we bring everything with us. You know, it's thanks to the great colleagues that I have in the Rehab Group that I can stand here and be very proud of what we have. But also the great colleagues right across, I suppose, this whole disability strategy. Because the man who gave permission for this disability strategy was the Taoiseach, the then Taoiseach, Bertie Ahern was his name. And the current Taoiseach is also quite significantly supportive of this. If we didn't have those two gentlemen behind the strategy, and if a country doesn't have their Prime Minister wholeheartedly behind it, it won't go forward as it should. Because, folks, the other government departments pay really close attention to the Prime Minister's office. And as the Prime Minister's office said, this is what we want, you'll get it. So my advice to anybody who's setting up or wishes to gather people together to set up a national disability strategy, make sure you're alive and well in the Prime Minister's constituency for a start, but also that you get his attention and tell him what it means for him to be included as I suppose, a very passionate ambassador of people with disabilities and the organisations that serve them. So thank you very much, everybody.